Welcome back, everybody, to our study through Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 16 is the study for today, and there's a free PDF, same one you're going to see up on the screen, that you can download on our website for free. There's a lot of other resources out there, too. When did the events of Leviticus chapter 16 happen? Well, Leviticus picks up right where Exodus left off. That puts us about 1490 BC, 1500 years before Jesus, and 1 year after the Israelites left slavery in Egypt. Our definition section is really interesting for this chapter. We just have one, and it's the name or the title Azazel. The identity of Azazel is a hotly debated topic, and there's more information than we can fit into a 5-minute Bible study. This is the only chapter in the Bible where this term is found. Some think that it was a name of a place, a location. Other people suspect that it was the name given to a demon or a fallen angel. I will let you go down the rabbit hole that is the study of Azazel. There is a ton of information online, some of it good, some of it not so good, but it's an interesting topic. Leviticus chapter 16 is about the Day of Atonement, which was a special day, happened once a year, that the high priest was supposed to offer sacrifices for the sins of the people. So that's what we're going to get into here. Verses 1 through 11, talking about the gathering and collecting of the sacrifices that were necessary for the Day of Atonement. So God spoke to Aaron, or rather, he spoke to Moses following the death of Aaron's two sons. You remember Nadab and Abihu back in chapter 11? And he told Moses to instruct Aaron that he was not to enter the most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant was, except under very specific circumstances. When the time came for Aaron to enter the most holy place, he was to clothe himself with the priestly garments and to take a bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering to the tabernacle. From the people, the nation of Israel, he was supposed to take 2 male goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering. The bull was to be offered for the sin offering for Aaron's house, him and his sons who operated as priests. Aaron was then to take the 2 goats and cast lots over them. Right? Lots is like a selection by random outcome. The goat that was selected by the lot was used as a sin offering, and the other goat was allowed to stay alive. It was presented to the Lord to make atonement, and then it was set free into the wilderness to Azazel, this term that we talked about just a moment ago. Then in our second section, verses 12 through 28, we're going to talk about the high priest entering the most holy place. So when it came time for Aaron to finally enter into that very sacred inner room of the tabernacle, he was supposed to take fire from the bronze altar and 2 handfuls of incense and to burn them in front of the most holy place so that the smoke from that incense covered the mercy seat. You remember the mercy seat sat on top of the Ark of the Covenant. He was then to take some of the bull's blood on his finger and sprinkle it on and in front of the mercy seat. He was also to take the goat that was used for a sin offering. It was to be killed. Some of its blood was to be taken and sprinkled on and in front of the mercy seat, just like the bull's blood. And we're told that by doing this, Aaron made, quote, atonement for his own sins, his family's sins, and for all of the people of Israel. And no one was allowed in the tabernacle when this was happening except for the high priest. When this was complete and the blood was on and in front of the mercy seat, Aaron was supposed to take some of the blood and atone for the bronze altar that sat in the courtyard in the same way that he atoned for the most holy place and the rest of the tabernacle. Then Aaron was to take the second goat, the lucky one that got to live, and to confess all of the sins of Israel over it while his hands were on its head. God said, quote, "The goat shall bear all their iniquities on itself to a remote area, and he shall let the goat go free in the wilderness." So there was an individual who was responsible for taking this goat out into the wilderness and then letting it go. Following this, Aaron was to bathe himself and offer the burnt offering for himself and the burnt offering for the people. And the man who took the goat out into the wilderness was supposed to bathe himself before he re-entered the camp of Israel. So if you've ever heard the term scapegoat, a scapegoat is like somebody who takes the blame for a group or for somebody else. Right? This is where that term comes from. This goat was bearing the responsibility or bearing the sins of the people, and then it was being sent out. God's final instruction in this chapter, verses 29 through 34, is that this was to be a statute forever. So this Day of Atonement, which today is known as Yom Kippur, if you've ever heard of that or seen it on a calendar, this day was to be observed by the Jews every year on the 10th day of the 7th month. They were to, quote, afflict themselves, which traditionally has been understood as they were supposed to fast that day, and they were to abstain from any ordinary work on that day. It was a special Sabbath day. The day was dedicated to their cleansing from sin. And so that is Leviticus chapter 16. There's tons and tons of information in these last couple chapters, so thanks for hanging with us. Now, let's close with an application. Why did Jesus have to come and die on the cross if animals could just be sacrificed to forgive sins? Well, the New Testament tells us that these animal sacrifices didn't truly have the effect of atoning for sin, but they were put in place for a time. This was all God's plan. They were put in place for a time as a symbol until true atonement could be realized. And not all of this is explained in Leviticus chapter 16. You have to read the rest of the Bible to fully understand this picture. But the author of Hebrews in Hebrews 10 verse 4 writes, "For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sin." The scapegoat that was sent off into the wilderness is actually a perfect example of this and an illustration of this reality. It carried the sins of the Israelites out into the wilderness, but that goat was still alive somewhere wandering around out there. In this situation, these sins needed to be completely removed. The problem needed to be dealt with once and for all, and that's why Jesus came and died on the cross. He offered his body as a sacrifice, quote, once for all, according to Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 10. Hebrews 10:12 through 14 says this, quote, "But when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God, waiting from that time until his enemies should be made a footstool for his feet. For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified." God also said, quote, "I will remember their sins and their lawless deeds no more. Where there is forgiveness of these, there is no longer any offering for sin." That's Hebrews 10:17 through 18. So that's why Jesus had to come. Leviticus chapter 16 is laying down some of the first building blocks of God's story. These symbols are being put in place that Jesus is later going to explain further through his life, his words, and his ministry.